putting in work. Work, yeah. Putting in work. I thank God for the favor when the money come. Half for the time, tax fees, insufficient funds. What I gotta do to get ahead? I'm on to something. What I gotta do to get a raise? They all be wanting putting in work. All I ever wanted was a choice. Rolls Royce.
At the Modest Sports Show, we believe in teamwork, and not just on the field. That's why we're proud to partner with Lift Up the Vulnerable, an incredible organization protecting the world's most at-risk children in war-torn regions. Through your support, Lift Up the Vulnerable prevents human trafficking, offers life-saving education, and provides hope to vulnerable communities. Over 86% of every dollar they receive goes directly into their transformative work in Sudan and South Sudan. Make a difference today by becoming a monthly sponsor. Whether it's $10 or $500 a month, every dollar matters. And don't forget, follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media to see how your support is changing lives in real time. To learn more about the incredible work they're doing, contact Alex Hill at 205-515-6696 or visit liftupthevulnerable.org. Follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media and join the movement. Together, let's lift those up who need it most. Welcome to the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete, where we are player-led and player-focused. I'm your host, Corey, for the evening. Man, like, we are filming this on Tuesday night. College football playoff reveal 4 or 5 just came out this evening. And we have a lot to get into. We got a lot to talk about tonight. I mean, for starters, Alabama is looking like they're going to get in the playoff. They're looking like they're going to get in the playoffs. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. We're going to save that for the meat and potatoes. But before we even get to that, something that took place last weekend were a lot of college football conference championships being clinched, spots being clinched by teams. Now, let me pause on that. Before we get into that, all of the good stuff that we have for this evening, at this point in the video, like, comment, subscribe, share the video with a friend. We just reached 500 subscribers. We've surpassed it a little bit, but we still have more room to grow, more room to improve. So, guys, I would greatly appreciate if you just continue to go with us on this journey as we head to the top and join the Modest Sports Show community. And be sure to, leave a review. You can find us on social media, on Instagram, on X, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. I'm on Facebook personally. You can find me at Corey Albert, but everything else is at the Modest Sports Show. If you type in the Modest Sports Show, you'll see us. TMSS, you'll see us. But like I was saying, so last weekend, college football playoffs and everything else in between was on the line. It was a lot of implications in some of the rivalry games. It was some must-win situations, and there were some teams who just couldn't afford to lose. And so, with that being said, I believe we really got to see teams for who they were. And like I said, there were teams who clinched spots like Texas. There were teams who clinched spots like Penn State, even though they didn't necessarily play in the game to clinch. But just by way of default, with other teams losing, they were able to clinch spots. And like the ACC, Miami losing to Syracuse. It was just a lot of craziness going on, okay? But I want to get into some of these conference championship games before we talk about the playoffs. Because, like I said, there is something that the college football playoff chair said that really struck me. And I really want to hear y'all thoughts when we get to it. But for starters, okay, in our conference championship games, we're going to start with the SEC. So we have number 2 Texas facing off against number 5 Georgia Saturday on December 7th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. All right, so coming into this game, Texas, in their win against Texas A&M, I think they looked pretty strong. They looked pretty in control of the game for a great part of the game. I will say, shout out to Texas A&M for challenging them on the road or at home. They didn't allow Texas to just come in there and just run off with the game, right? They gave Texas A&M a challenge, and the score was 17-7. And the only points that Texas A&M scored were off a defensive turnover. It was a pick six resulting in a touchdown. So Texas A&M played Texas pretty good for the majority of the game. Some things that stuck out to me, and I even went on record noting this, probably a few episodes ago, was just I think Texas A&M for the most part this year had a very solid team, right? Mike Elko, this is his first year at Texas A&M, and I think for it to be his first year, he brought it back to a state of relevance in the SEC after it had been years since we actually considered Texas A&M to be a contender in the SEC. Mike Elko in his first year established that. So I feel like going forward, Texas A&M has they have a bright future ahead. Today I actually saw that Connor Wigman, right there, he started the season off as their starting quarterback, but I think after the after Texas A&M, after the LSU game, I believe he was kind of relieved of his duties then, and they decided to roll with Marcel Reed the rest of the season. I still feel like Texas A&M had a pretty good team, though. I think the defense was a very strong suit for them this year. And even as elite as Marcel Reed is as an athlete, I think he was limited as a passer. And so that Texas A&M offense wasn't able to really spread its wings and soar like you would have hoped them to. But again, you really can't complain with Mike Elko being in his first season and coming off the year that he just had, 8-4, bowl eligible in year one, and played a lot of tough games this season and won some tough games, right? Beat Florida on the road, I believe. Took Notre Dame down to the wire in that game in the beginning of the year. So Texas A&M showed a lot of bright moments this season. Now, Texas, on the other hand, like I mentioned, they dominated that game in part, right? It was a hard-fought victory. Sark obviously showed that I think as we lead into the playoffs, he's going to start leaning more on Arch to do some of the things that isn't necessarily a part of Quinn Ewer's repertoire. And he does it in a way that allows for the Texas offense to remain conducive in creating for itself. It's not like some two quarterback systems where it's almost jarring. Like, okay, well, you see these guys making plays and creating momentum for the team, but then the next drive you see another quarterback. I think Sark does a good job utilizing Arch Manning and definitely utilizing his legs. Obviously, we've seen him come in the game and score in the red zone area. And so very interested to see how Sark and company kind of utilize that two quarterback system going forward, right, as we kind of carry into the postseason. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, they're coming off a 8 overtime victory against Georgia Tech. Now, I know everybody was on the fence, I think, it's safe to say we all been on the fence with Georgia this season, right? However, Georgia Tech was no slouch of a team. Georgia Tech showed, to me, in its first outing this season against Florida State, and this is before we knew what Florida State would become, so we can't act like, well, okay, Florida State, they weren't a tough team or whatever the case might be. No, Florida State at that time was a top 10 ranked team, and Georgia State knocked them off overseas by a kick at the end of the game to win it. And so, to me, that was very telling of what this Georgia Tech team could be this season. I believe they have great leadership under Brent Key. This is something I spoke on a few weeks ago, I believe. And this Georgia Tech team, they're another team. I'm not quite sure as we stand today what pieces they're going to lose, be it to the portal or to the NFL draft. But the Georgia Tech team has a very bright future ahead of them, especially under that leadership of Coach Brent Key. And so to Georgia's credit, right, you get the win. You get the victory. That's the most important thing, okay? Georgia Tech, they weren't the typical underdog team. I know a lot of people gave Georgia flack, like in air quotes. Georgia just went in 8 overtimes against a Georgia Tech team. No, Georgia Tech was actually a good team this year. And if you watch them, you've seen that Haynes King and Jamal Haynes and Malik Rutherford and so forth and so on really gave this team some explosive plays this year, and they were nobody to sleep on. We saw Miami lose on the road to Georgia Tech, and so and Georgia Tech being at the time a 6-4 team, and so Georgia, on the other hand, they are coming off a good win. We got to label that a good win, even though it was at home, even though it was against Georgia Tech. It was a decent win to come out, and especially when we look at the margin in stats, okay? Georgia, yes, they needed a miracle to win the game, but they lost the time of possession margin by 15 minutes, almost 20 less offensive plays. They had less first downs. So in every category of the game, Georgia Tech pretty much won the game. Georgia, however, showed some resilience, showed some fight, and they came out with a victory. So I know for some it's kind of like, how do you want to rate those victories? I mean, obviously they get the win, but is it more of a moral victory being that they just kind of escaped the game? Either way, I always like to credit teams based on the resilience that they show to fight through the adversity. Like, how do they get the win? Sometimes, yeah, the blowout victories are good, and it kind of allows you to see a team in a different light. But every now and again, more often than not for this Georgia team this year, they've scraped out some wins, and so got to give Georgia credit in that regard. However, Georgia versus Texas this week, here's what I got to say about that. So in their first outing, right, Georgia got some breaks in the short field advantage, okay? They forced some turnovers, and just going based on the stats, right, where each team ranks offensively and defensively against each other, Georgia is probably going to need some things, or they're going to need the ball to bounce their way to come out with a win against Texas, right? And so I guess we could say, just based on location, obviously with the game being in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Georgia is pretty much going to have home field advantage. And we're going to really see a lot of black and red in the stands. And so Georgia really is going to need that to feed, and they're going to have to feed off of that to get a win against Texas. This Texas team, I feel like they're kind of rolling right now, especially after that win against Texas A&M, kind of picking up the steam. And this, my friends, kind of reminds me of last year. Now, not necessarily to the precise degree, but just a little bit. Just and follow me. Here's the similarity. So, with Washington and Oregon last season, we saw them match up in the regular season, and then obviously we saw them match up in their conference championship game too. Similar this year to Texas and Georgia. So Georgia would be Washington this season by having gotten a win in the regular season. So is Georgia going to be able to do it again like Washington was? And like we saw from that Washington team, they went on to compete in the national championship game. Didn't win it, fell short, but they were able to get there ultimately. So in this game here, for me, I look at it like, if Texas was to lose this game again, okay, where is that going to throw Texas in the top 12? Like, where do we put Texas 1 through 12, okay? And with Georgia, right, with them being a 2-loss team at this part in the season, is that going to put them out the playoffs because they're sitting in the 7th spot? Or how does the committee go about ranking them? So with Texas and Georgia, with both scenarios being a constant, you tell me what you think about if either team loses and what that looks like. Moving on to the ACC. In the ACC, we have number 8 SMU versus number 18 Clemson. Saturday, December the 7th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, for this game, I said this is going to be a good matchup. This will be my first time watching SMU in action. Like, I was able to catch glimpses of them this season, but guys, give me a break. I'm a one-man show. And so keeping up with some of these teams, keeping up with 134 FBS teams for one person can be a tough task. SMU, though, just going based on what I've heard and, like I said, the glimpses I've caught of them as a team, SMU is a very balanced team, right? I think they play very good complementary football, and their offense, too, has a lot of balance to it. I've seen that they can run the ball and they can throw the ball when necessary. So I'm looking to see what type of challenge they're going to present to this Clemson football team, who is obviously coming off a loss to their rival, South Carolina, at home. That was a game that I feel like Clemson was really challenged by an SEC school in South Carolina who they picked up the steam as the season went on, right? They lost to LSU, lost to Ole Miss, lost to Alabama. So when we think about brands of football and traditionally what would happen in each one of those games throughout the course of the years, technically they are supposed to lose those games. But, however, I think they only lost to Alabama by less than a score. With LSU, that game went down to the wire. I think that was a kick. Ole Miss was really the only team that got the best of them. But in that game, I know Lenore Sellers, he kind of struggled to get going in that. So, and I feel like he was probably at the time still kind of dealing with injury from his LSU game. And even looking back on the LSU game, if he plays the second half, who knows what they do in that game. So I mean, for this South Carolina team, they really finished the season strong. We're gonna get to how maybe if you're a Gamecocks fan, you might feel snubbed at this point in the season, in the night, especially with it being so fresh on our viewers' minds. And so, aside from that, this ACC matchup, I think it's gonna be a great matchup. I think SMU is definitely going to, like I said, challenge Clemson, and I look forward to seeing some good football. Like I said, this game is going to be at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and in this game, I mean, obviously, Clemson probably has home field advantage more than SMU. SMU, man, got to give a big big shout-outs to them for how they came into the ACC in year one and made the conference championship. Man, Texas, not looking too bad in both of their new conference joinings. Moving on to the Big Ten. We have number 1 Oregon facing off against number 3 Penn State Saturday night, December 7th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, for this one, I don't think this is going to be much of a game, at least down the stretch. Penn State is going to rely heavily on their ground game, and they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to make Oregon come tackle us. Like, how physical do you want to be with this brand of hard-nosed football, right? That's what Penn State is going to do. However, I see a world where this 7th-ranked defense in the nation in the Oregon Ducks show that they're a real Big Ten team at this point in the season, but on the defensive side, but offensively show that they can out-finesse you. Right, they come into this game ranked 15th in the nation on offense, averaging about 448.5 yards per game. I do believe Oregon will be tested offensively, especially to start the game early. So I'm not by any means saying that this is going to be a walk in the park for this Oregon Ducks football team. However, I think as the game progresses, I'm going to give the nod to Oregon to come out and just be able to outscore, just be able to score more points than that Penn State team. So that's an easy pick for me. That's my national championship favorite. And, yeah, that's just what I feel about that Big Ten game. No knock to Penn State. Think they're a great football program. And I'm actually, like I said, like I even mentioned in the SEC championship game, I'm interested to see what teams are going to, or what the ranking is going to look like when these, 4 or 5 teams from the conference championship games, what they're going to look like as teams lose. Like, what are the rankings going to look like? How's it going to shake things up? So I'm interested to see that. In this Big 12 game, Big 12 slate, we have number 12 Arizona State versus number 16 Iowa State. Saturday, December the 7th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is going to be the kickoff to our football Saturday at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. So, me personally, I said this really might be the most interesting game of the day because there's so much at stake, right? I think, and I say this with great caution, I believe that Penn State, they lose, they still got a chance, okay? Clemson, if they lose, SMU, if they lose, I think you still got a chance. Georgia, if they lose, I think you still have a chance. Texas loses, still got a chance. So, in this Big 12 game, though, I believe the College Football Playoff Committee has made it very clear that from this Big 12 conference, there's only going to be one team. And so that's why it's so much on the line in this game. So much on the you lose and you're out. And so both teams they're really playing for a lot. Iowa State, another team much like SMU, I haven't really gotten a lot of chance to or a lot of opportunity to watch them and see what they're quite capable of. However, I do feel like, you know, a game with this magnitude, they're going to step up and show out. Arizona State, on the other hand, they're going to put a lot of stress on Iowa State's rush defense. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is an area that Iowa State has struggled in, stopping the run. And I believe that was a great part of why they lost to Cincinnati. And so, really curious to see how Iowa State is going to fare. They're going to be playing inside stadium, so weather conditions shouldn't be a factor. And this Arizona State team, like another team, got to give kudos to them for what they've been able to come into the conference and do in year one. A lot of year one teams, like, it's just the nature of the game at this point in its lifetime. A lot of teams have come into new conferences and flexed their muscle, right? Like saying we're here, and Arizona State being one. Really love their running back, Scatterbo. I think he's a phenomenal back. He shows elite physicality when running the ball. I think he averages, I think he's second in the nation in yak yards. So it shows elite physicality. Like, he's a punisher with the football. Shows speed when he gets to the second and third levels. Shows just he's a complete back. He's a hard-nosed bruiser back, and I feel like he's kind of the style running back that college football is missing these days. But also, shout out to the Big 12. They've produced a lot of great running backs this season. We've seen a lot of good running backs in the Big 12. I feel like almost each Big 12 team has its own running back. We have Taj Brooks at Texas Tech, Devin Neal at Kansas, Dijon Gideon at Kansas State. Who am I missing? Like I mentioned, Scatterbo at Arizona State. Yeah, a lot of great teams in the Big 12. A lot of great running backs in the Big 12. So definitely feel like that Big 12 championship slate is going to be great. Great game this weekend. Look forward to watching it. And we'll let you know what our picks are later in the week when we drop our graphics. So now let's get to the college football playoff top 12 rankings. Okay. Now look, tonight when I turned on the TV to turn this wonderful program on, I did not quite know what to expect. All right. I didn't expect what we got, but I also didn't know what to expect. So, 1 Oregon, 2 Texas, 3 SMU, 4 Boise State. I feel like no one will argue with that at this point in the season. Obviously, all 3 of these teams, or all 4 of those teams, are playing in their conference championships, and so they will have a first-round bye. Now, as we move into our 5 through 12 spots, here we go. At 5, we have Penn State. At 6, Notre Dame. 7, Georgia. 8, Ohio State. 9, Tennessee. 10, Indiana. 11, Alabama. And 12, Arizona State. So, the shocker of the night was Alabama getting in at 11, okay? I did not quite know if Alabama was going to have enough, if they were going to have enough to be able to get into the playoffs. But like we mentioned last week, they put Alabama in that 13 spot last week just to leave the door open for Alabama to get in. Now, I'm not mad at it. And I feel like there's a lot of blowback about Alabama getting in this 11th spot. But here's what I can say. I think it works. I really believe it works to both sides. With Alabama sitting in the 11th spot, they go on the road to whoever, right? And this is just as we look at the playoffs today. This is a snapshot of what it would be today. Alabama gets into the playoffs, and let's say they go to South Bend, or let's say they go to Happy Valley, or wherever. It's going to be a measuring stick of conferences, not the teams, but the conferences. Because for the past few weeks, all we've seen is, well, the SEC isn't this and the SEC isn't that. Okay, cool. I'm with you. I can accept that. But let's say Alabama goes on the road to South Bend and gets a win in that same 20 or 15-degree weather that you say us in the South can't play in. Then what? Cool. Let's say they go to Happy Valley and do it against a Big Ten team, and they get a win. So that's gonna really open up, and then if it happens vice versa, it's gonna have the same blowback effect. Like, it's gonna have the same effect. And so that's why I like it. That's particularly why I like it. Even as Georgia, like today, Indiana will have to come down here to Georgia. Well, or Tennessee would have to go up to Ohio State. This is just as it looks today. And so I'm liking this. And I actually made note of that. The thing that I like most about this is we're seeing teams, right, that have the opportunity to play teams that they would never have played, and on top of that, play in places that they would have never played. I seen a stat right before getting on tonight. Alabama hasn't played in South Bend since 1987. And the terrain of college football has changed tremendously since then. So this is going to provide a lot of fireworks and a lot of drama as we head to this national championship. And I said this a few weeks ago or a couple nights ago, whatever. If Alabama was to get into this playoffs and run the table and win a championship, I think that would be the funniest thing known to man. That would be the funniest thing. That really would be the funniest thing. So Alabama left. They got in. They snuck in. And I also want to mention something that the college football playoff chair, I believe his name is Ward Manuel, said when Reese Davis asked him a series of questions. Okay. Teams that are not playing cannot be adjusted where they are compared to other teams that are not playing. So in other words, right, everyone feels like South Carolina got snubbed. Like this is a real-time podcast. Like, it is 8:50 on December the 3rd, and right now Twitter is in a frenzy about Alabama getting into the playoffs. There are people, I'm not watching the playoffs because Alabama is in the playoffs. Cool. As it stands today, the college football playoff chair essentially told us, without saying it, that the order 1 through 12, right, like these teams that we see in the college football playoffs right now are going to be the teams that we see. Because for the ones that cannot play, like Alabama or Indiana, the ones that have no more games, Indiana, Alabama, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Ohio State, those teams are pretty much set because they have no other games to play. All the other teams are playing in conference championship games. So there's a few teams who I really feel like a loss in this college football playoff, a loss in their conference championship is going to dictate them being able to make the playoffs or not, i.e. Clemson if they lose to SMU, Georgia if they lose to Texas, potentially. Boise State if they were to lose to UNLV. And I think that's one of the biggest losses, actually, if Boise State was to lose to UNLV. I think they'd get left out. I think a group of 5 school at that point would probably get left out. Just the way it's just how firm the competition is at the top, because I feel like right now the committee just needs an excuse to get a South Carolina team in, right, while being able to keep Alabama or a team of the sorts in. So, man, this college football rankings is tough. I went this whole episode, or a great part of the episode, without even asking you, what do you think? What do you think about? I don't want to just talk at you. I want to talk to you. What do you think about tonight's college football playoff ranking? And then what do you think about some of these conference championship games, right? In the Big Ten, the ACC, Big 12, SEC. How do these teams match up to you? Who are your winners in each one of those games? And that is all that Corey has for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed this quick episode. I'm not even sure how long I went tonight. But I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Guys, we are almost to 550 subscribers. I guess you set new goals each time. I would love to get there. I would love for you all to continue to support me in my goal and journey to get to one of those top spots in the college football talk head industry, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, guys, this is the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete. And just like that, we will see you on the next video. You all have a great evening.